Freesat channel 216.
Freeview channel 236.
And YouView channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB+ radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akua, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, at 9:30 on Sunday morning when two top Tories give me their reaction to the government's Stop the Boats policy. I'll be speaking to former Deputy Prime Minister Damien Green as well as the former Justice Secretary Robert Buckland. And Jonathan Sumption, the former Supreme Court Justice and leading lockdown sceptic, will give me his reaction to the lockdown files. All that and more with me, Camilla Tominey, this Sunday morning from 9:30.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
No spin, no bias, no censorship. I'm Dan Wootton. Tonight, a difficult day for small C Conservatives as our chairman, Chancellor Jeremy Hunt, presents his high-taxed big state budget that no one asked for.
After the corporation tax rise this April, 10% of companies will pay the full 25% rate.
If high-tax Hunt and Fishy Rishi are committed to an anti-growth globalist future, then why the hell would anyone vote Conservative at the next election? I'll offer my unflinching analysis of the budget in my digest next. Then I'll get the view of my superstar panel tonight. I'm joined by Dawn Neeson, Dominic Samuels and Nigel Nelson. Then former Home Secretary Priti Patel delivers her verdict.
Corporation tax is a big issue and it's here to stay and it's not going to go away, and he's heard me say as well, I'm going to continue making the representations, but we've got to flip this round.
Don't miss more from that rare exclusive interview with one of the Conservative Party's sharpest political minds, where she'll weigh in on the small boats crisis too. That's coming up later in the show. Plus, does anyone believe that budget was a success? I'll ask Conservative MP Greg Smith, Tory grandee David Mallor, Daily Telegraph columnist Madeline Grant and the chairman of Cobra Bear, Lord Karen Billamoria, when they go head-to-head in the clash. Also coming up tonight, it didn't take long for an emboldened Gary Lineker to wade into yet another political Twitter row, this time with a red wall Tory MP. But boxing promoter Frank Warren has delivered this knockout blow.
How on earth can you compare us as a nation with them? Gary Lineker. Him.
So does the match of the day presenter damage the future of the British bashing corporation every day he remains in post? Our very own Nana Akua analyses. As J.K. Rowling explains what she was willing to sacrifice in her historic fight for women's rights.
I absolutely knew that if I spoke out, many people who had loved my books would be deeply unhappy with me.
So do more public figures need to put principles over popularity in the fight for our way of life? Ex-Education Minister Andrea Jenkins, whose plans to meet with the Harry Potter author were scuppered by the woke civil service, is going to join me live in the studio soon. Plus, as Fergie claims that Meghan is a love Harry's never had before, the Duke's biographer, Angela Levin, analyses why the Sussex PR machine is in overdrive ahead of the coronation. And with mass walkouts on Budget Day largely shrugged off by a wary public and politicians too, have the strikes failed? That's our big debate later in the show. We'll have a first look at tomorrow's newspaper front pages, hot off the press as ever, and a brand new Greatest Britain Union Jackass coming up soon. This is Dan Wootton Tonight. Let's go. My special budget digest coming up very shortly. But first, the news with Polly Milhurst.
Dan, thank you, and good evening to you. Well, of course, Budget Day today, and Jeremy Hunt, the Chancellor, has vowed to encourage millions of people to rejoin the workforce and boost Britain's financial growth in his first budget as Chancellor. Mr Hunt said the Office for Budget Responsibility now forecasts the UK will no longer enter recession this year. Instead, inflation is predicted to fall from 10.7%, that's at the end of last year, to 2.9% by the end of 2023. Let's go through the key points mentioned in the budget then. The measures include a reduction in duty paid on draft beer and cider bought in pubs. And there's a further 12-month freeze on fuel duty. Also, abolishing the lifetime allowance on tax-free pension savings, which was at £1 million. Also in the budget today, extending the current energy price guarantee for a further 3 months and bringing prepayment meter charges in line with those who pay by direct debit. Well, the Chancellor also announced an increase to the defence budget worth £11 billion over the next 5 years. And he freed the way for more women to return to work. Eligible households will be offered 30 hours of free childcare every week for every child over the age of 9 months.
We have never seen before such a comprehensive attempt to say that in this country, if people want to work, we should take away the barriers. And that doesn't matter if you're an older person, someone who's disabled, someone who's looking for work, a parent worried about childcare costs. The government is on your side. If you want to work, we want to help you.
Jeremy Hunt. Well, the Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer called the budget a sticking plaster.
His opening boast was that things aren't quite as bad now as they were in October last year after the kamikaze budget. And the more that he pretends everything is fine, the more he shows just how out of touch they are. After 13 years of his government, our economy needed major surgery. But like millions across our country, this budget leaves us stuck in the waiting room with only a sticking plaster to hand.
Now, news away from the budget, and after concerns about a bank in the United States, the London Stock Exchange suffered its worst losses since the start of the COVID pandemic, as fears of a global banking crisis intensified. Here in London, the FTSE 100 closed down more than 292 points as global banking stocks went into free fall just days after the collapse of the Silicon Valley Bank in the United States. Credit Suisse was one of the big players worst affected, seeing its share price drop by a quarter. That's a new record low, and coming a day after the bank had told investors it had failed to identify any risks in its financial reporting. Just lastly, NASA has unveiled a prototype of the spacesuit set to be worn by the next generation of astronauts who walk on the moon's surface. It's not white, it's this time a black spacesuit with orange markers featuring a light band and high-definition cameras. It also allows far greater mobility than its predecessors, and it'll be used during the Artemis mission, which is scheduled for 2025. That's the latest from the GB Newsroom. We're back in an hour. Now back to Dan.
Was anyone else watching the budget today thinking, what on earth did small C Conservatives do to deserve the pro-China, zero-COVID zealot and arch-Ramona Jeremy Hunt at the dispatch box, delivering a high-tax, big-state budget that no one asked for, including his own party? During last summer's leadership campaign, where he was roundly and embarrassingly rejected by Tory members, high-tax Hunt claimed he was all for cutting the size of the state and taxes, including, wait for this, pledging to slash corporation tax to 12.5p.
Corporation tax is the tax that matters most to businesses and defines whether we are a pro-enterprise economy. I want to cut it to 15%, the lowest we're allowed to cut it to according to international agreements.
But now that he's been installed by the globalist establishment political blob at MSM in an anti-democratic coup that saw both Boris Johnson and Liz Truss deposed, he's singing from a new hymn sheet. Despite pleas from the true Conservatives in his department, there were no tax cuts today, and corporation tax will soar to a crippling 25%, damning us to a low-growth future.
After the corporation tax rise this April, 10% of companies will pay the full 25% rate.
So what happened, Chancellor? What changed for you to go from 15p to 25p? Who is really calling the shots? Well, we know from the Truss experiment what happens when you pursue a Britain-first economic policy to challenge the economic orthodoxy. So Sunak and Hunt, let's just be honest about it, they're doing what the financial establishment wants them to do. But at what cost to their own party? What now distinguishes the high-tax, big-state Tories from the high-tax, big-state Labour Party before the next election? And look, by the way, that's not to say that there were not some brilliant initiatives delivered by Hunt in the budget today. Rebranding nuclear energy, for example, as environmentally sustainable is brave, bold and necessary in the deranged march to net zero. Pension tax reform is long overdue. And childcare reform has stolen much of the thunder from robotic Reeves and slippery Starmer, who reluctantly endorsed the policy.
Childcare, of course, more money in the system is obviously a good thing.
But today's budget failed to answer a much more fundamental question. If Sunak and Hunt are committed to hiking taxes as part of a global system and making absolutely no real bid to cut the size of government and the state or reform our failing institutions like the NHS and the BBC, then what exactly is the point of voting Conservative at the next election? The former Home Secretary, Priti Patel, will weigh in on that question later in the show. But to respond first, my superstar panel. Former Daily Star editor Dawn Neeson, the political commentator Dominic Samuels, and the political editor of the Sunday Mirror, Nigel Nelson. So, Nigel, you say you like this budget because it was a Labour budget.
It certainly was.
And actually, that's my point. If you like it, Nigel, something's very wrong with this budget.
Well, look, they nicked... what Jeremy Hunt did was he nicked several ideas from Labour, that the idea of keeping the energy price guarantee at £2,500, that's been Labour policy for the last 2 or 3 months. The freeze on fuel duty, they've also been calling for that. The extension of free childcare, another one. And even, just to be sort of really cheeky, he nicked Keir Starmer's idea of the British energy company by announcing a great British nuclear company.
Dawn Neeson, what do you think about whether this new Tory regime is actually true blue Conservative? I mean, what is the motivation to vote for a high-tax Tory party?
I think the motivation isn't to scare people like the Liz Truss effort. I think it's to stabilise where we are now. And I'm not too bad with it. Not too bad with it at all. I think the flagship policy of the childcare issue, I think, is going to win a lot of Labour voters over. So I think that is a good thing. And speaking as a woman, and my mum sort of had awful problems, you know, when she was younger, raising children and working. So I think it's a good thing that we will be helping working women to get back into work and hopefully stabilise the situation there. So I think it's not, on the whole, it's not too bad.
Dominique?
Well, in my view, I mean,
Can we hear Dominique? Yep.
Right, OK. Well, in my view, I think there are some good things in the budget. I think it's important not to catastrophise. I think that the childcare policy is brilliant because people have long been saying that it's far too expensive for people, especially mothers, to actually contribute and get back into work. And also, when people talk about birth rates declining, it's things like having children and not being able to work and it being too expensive that decentivise people from getting back into work. The only thing is, I think, is the issue with the tax. You know, for working people and for people without children, there really is no benefit in terms of this budget. But I think the aim, really, sort of alluding to what Dawn said, is to sort of keep the steering wheel steady until the next election, until Labour wins.
I know, but exactly, but that's pathetic. That's pathetic. And actually, when is the Conservative Party going to wake up, Dawn, and realise that they will not be elected if they are a pale imitation of Labour? Because, sure, a lot of people will vote for the Conservatives because they believe that Labour equals open borders. And I think we've seen over the past week, with Keir Starmer's backing of Gary Lineker, which we're going to talk about later in the show, that they are an open borders party. That's their true intentions. But you've got to have an economic component too. And I'm struggling to see what the Conservatives' economic agenda now is.
I really don't think they've done too bad. And I do think the childcare issue...
The tax burden is going to be the highest ever by 2027.
The corporation... Well, look what we've been through over the last few years. I mean, if you didn't see the fact that we'd all have to pay more taxes coming down the line, then you were pretty stupid. Not you personally, obviously, Dan. But...
Well, I did see it coming.
Well, we
I warned
all did.
of this.
Anyone with half a brain did. So you knew that the tax burden was going to go up.
Well, no one at the BBC did, no one at ITV News did, no one at Sky News did.
People with a brain, Dan, come on. I think everyone here did. So I think the corporation tax thing is a big mistake. And Rishi Sunak actually campaigned on that. On keeping that.
I know, but fundamentally, Nigel, look, I know you don't like this government, but fundamentally you must understand, given your vast experience at Westminster, that Conservatives don't win when they're trying to be New Labour. That's what I don't understand. Why do they think they're going to beat Starmer by being New Labour? It's bizarre to me.
Largely because the best ideas that came out of this budget did come from Labour, so what we're dealing here is short-termism. What he's got to do is bring down inflation, which should fall. I mean, you know, the prediction now is from 10% now to 2.9 by the end of the year.
Which was going to happen regardless of the budget.
Well, that probably would happen regardless of the budget, you're right, because of fuel prices going down. But the point is, you don't then stoke it up again by throwing more money into the economy, which is what tax cuts would have done.
Well, I
doesn't mean that they won't do
I disagree with that,
tax
and that's
cuts
a fundamental policy disagreement. But, Dominique, what's very concerning to me, and you know how I feel about high-tax Hunt, and he's very signed up to the globalist agenda, and you think about it, and actually he is now marching to the beat of the drum of the big economic institutions who don't want the UK to have an economic independence, who want us to go with this minimum corporation tax that the rest of the world might sign up to at one point. And it's wrong. It's wrong. It just is so fundamentally wrong, because that isn't why we voted to Brexit.
Yeah, I mean, that is the issue, I think. It's the lack of democratic oversight, especially when people like Hunt and people like Sunak are signed up to a general financial consensus in terms of how they've wanted to steer the economy.
And that's going to damn us to low growth, though. That is going to damn us to low growth. And you can say whatever you want about Liz Truss, but she wasn't prepared to sign up to a low-growth future. And unfortunately, after the budget today, and yes, I think there were some great innovations, some great initiatives in the budget, and I am happy to praise them. But fundamentally, I struggle when a Conservative government is increasing corporation tax rates. And by the way, you've got to look around the world. No other country in the Western world is increasing their corporation tax rates at all.
But ours
France
is
has actually lowered
than other
them.
parts of the world.
And I think the only major country that is Colombia. And I don't think we should be following their economic policy. But there you go. John Neeson, Dominic Samuels, Nigel Nelson, thank you so much. My superstar panel are here all night. But also coming up, as Sarah Ferguson changes her tune on Meghan, having previously claimed she had barely met her, is the Sussex PR machine gearing up ahead of May's coronation? Royal biographer Angela Levin joins me very soon. But up next, in the clash, chairman of Cobra Bear, Lord Karen Billy Moria, goes up against former Chief Secretary to the Treasury, David Mallow, alongside parliamentary sketchwriter and Telegraph columnist Madeline Grant, and the Tory MP Greg Smith. It's a mega clash tonight to decide whether today's budget for growth was ultimately a success or a failure. What do you reckon? Dan at gbnews.uk. Vote in our poll live now at GB News. We're back in just a couple of minutes.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions are, those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akua, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today.
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
My exclusive sit-down with the former Home Secretary Priti Patel coming up, but it's time now for the clash. And the government's free childcare policy will lend a hand up to hard-up parents eventually, but the budget did have some major limitations. Unsurprisingly, high-tax Jeremy Hunt failed to slash any levies for hard-working Brits, while hiking corporation tax from 19 to 25%. Nevertheless, the government celebrated their so-called budget for growth with this cringe post on social media mocking Matt Hancock's criminally disgusting leaked lockdown files. But should Sunak and Hunt really be fist-bumping and celebrating? Well, tonight I'm asking you, was today's budget a success or failure? Send your thoughts to GB News, Dan at gbnews.uk, that's my email address, or you can tweet me at GB News. Our poll running there too. But I've got a stellar lineup to debate this tonight. I'm joined by the chairman of Cobra Bear and vice president of the CBI, Lord Karen Billamoria, former chief secretary to the Treasury and Tory grandee, David Malla, the parliamentary sketch writer and star columnist at the Daily Telegraph, Madeline Grant, and the Conservative MP for Buckingham, Greg Smith. OK, so we have a range of views tonight, but Lord Billamoria, you say the budget was a failure. Why?
I am saying that this budget is not a budget for growth in the sense that it should be. I think the government should be far bolder. I said to the Chancellor, when he was Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, 2 years ago, in February 2021, don't increase taxes, because if you increase taxes, it will stifle growth and hamper the recovery. We didn't realize then that not only would the pandemic drag on for another year, we'd have the war in Ukraine and all the problems that have existed for a crisis for 3 years, the worst since the Second World War. And we've had inflation, energy crisis, supply issues, labor shortages. It's one thing after another. And what does the government do? What did Rishi Sunak do? Put up taxes to the extent that they're the highest level in 70 years. This is not the time to put up taxes. To put up corporation tax from 19% to 25%, that's increasing it by almost 1/3 in one swoop, is really, really damaging, not only domestically, but it hampers inward investment. This little country of less than 1% of the world's population has historically been an attractor, second or third largest in the world of inward investment. When you put up corporation tax to 25%, and our neighbor Ireland has a top rate of 12.5%, that is really damaging, and I'm really concerned about that. On the other hand, with the CBI, where I've been president until recently, we were expecting a double whammy of increase in corporation tax and the removal of the super deduction, the 130% relief when you invested. I said to Rishi when he was Chancellor, please replace it with something. He promised he would, and he's kept his promise. We've got a compensation now of 100% if you invest in technology, in plant and equipment and machinery, you can write off 100% of it. That's very good news because that incentivizes investment. So we've got
that was the positive. That was the positive, but it still doesn't make up for the corporation tax hike. Madeline Grant, what are you saying? Success or failure? Or are you on the fence?
I think it wasn't quite on the fence on the budget. It was somewhere in the middle, and I kind of understand why. I think that after the last, what was called the statement from Liz Truss that was allegedly not really a full budget, and the fallout from that, you can kind of understand why they would want to not spook the horses too much, not do anything too ambitious. As Lord Billamoria said, there was obviously a lot to celebrate. I actually think one of the areas where I was quite disappointed was the news about the childcare, the extra money going in there, because I think fundamentally what they're trying to do is, subsidise it more for families with young children, but actually not necessarily getting to the grip of the supply issue. Why is it so expensive in the first place? So I think it lacked a bit of the supply side thing. It seemed like more an attempt to subsidise it. And there's already been a great deal of subsidy going into the childcare sector, and the results have been, well, we see for ourselves. So for me, it was a mixed bag with some good news and perhaps some underwhelming news alongside it.
Interesting, especially that take on the childcare policy, which has been viewed as one of the rabbits out of the hat. David Malla, what say you? High tax Hunt's budget, a success or a failure?
Well, it's not a success, is it? I needed a few of Karen's beers to get through it, actually. It's not a success. And the reason it's not a success is because there's no belief there. When I was Chief Secretary of the Treasury, Margaret Thatcher had taken us from 34% of the national wealth being consumed by taxation, down to 27%. Labour drove that back up, and the Tories under Sunak and his predecessors have driven it back up further. You cannot be a successful chancellor unless you have a belief, unless you have a mission. Now, I don't blame Jeremy Hunt in one sense for not having a mission, because he was thrown in literally at the deep end. And although a very experienced and competent minister, he has had no experience whatsoever in the past in the Treasury. But I just think this is a belief-free budget, and it's a disgrace. I mean, I agree with everything Karen Villamoria said. I don't disagree with his veer. I agree with his opinions. Everything he said. Look, what is a Conservative government doing? Increasing corporation tax by 30% and then pretending it doesn't matter. I looked at my history books, and as far as I can see, the last time there was any kind of increase on this scale in corporation tax was back in 1974 under an incoming spend Labour government. And I just think it's an outrage that the Conservatives should think that this is something to cheer about. And that awful fist bumping, they should find a more stylish way of celebrating, I think.
Well, look,
anyway,
I'm with you. I'm with you, David Mallow. So this is a tough one for you, Greg Smith. How do you defend your party's budget after that takedown from one of your party grandees?
Well, Dan, I was one of the MPs that was calling on the Chancellor to cut corporation tax, or at least keep it where it was. So to that extent, it was disappointing, and I am worried about the prospects of growth off the back of us going from the 9th lowest corporation tax of the OECD 38 to the 9th highest. That is a concern. But I think there was some good news in the budget. The list you gave at the top of your show was an accurate reflection of the good points, the full expensing to get businesses investing, although if you look at some of the modelling around what that will actually do to the economy, where that will actually get businesses investing, you could have split the difference and only increased corporation tax to, say, 22%, not that I'm defending an increase in corporation tax. The childcare stuff, I think, will make a huge difference, but I do agree with some of the points around fixing the supply side element of that. The very technical change to pensions, actually, it probably won't resonate on the doorstep that much, but if it works, it will make a huge difference to the number of doctors actively choosing to leave the NHS, to leave the service they've worked so hard for all their lives and done so much training to become doctors for, because the pension system was just working against them and was giving them a massive incentive to leave. So there are some big positives.
And the pension reform, that was great. I mean, Madeline Grant, I guess one of the key issues is that there doesn't seem to be anymore a fundamental belief in this Tory government that they need to bring down the size of the state, that they need to reform our failing institutions like the NHS and the BBC. It's almost like, have they given up?
Well, it's kind of interesting because I remember during the Tory leadership contest when Jeremy Hunt was actually running as a potential candidate for that election, and he was very adamant that corporation tax levels had to be very low indeed.
Yeah, he wanted to cut it to below 15p.
Exactly, sort of taking us into Ireland territory, and clearly he understood the value of doing that last year. And now I don't think you can simply say that present economic circumstances are different because of the fallout from the Trust budget. It does, I think, as you say, speak to a lack of vision. And also, I think, perhaps a missed opportunity now that, in many ways we seem to be progressing beyond the Brexit disputes that have prevented the government from really fully capitalising on that decision. Yeah. We were always told that, after Brexit, the idea would be not just to be vaguely better than countries like France and Germany in terms of our, tax competitiveness, but to be kind of aggressively competitive.
Yeah, and we could smash them. Exactly. But look, we've lost that attitude, though. And so what changed, David Mallow? What changed? How does Hunt go from saying that increasing corporation tax would damn our economy to a low growth future last summer when he's running for leadership, to agreeing to increase it to 25p? Who's calling the shots? Are they so terrified after the international economic orthodoxy turned on the UK after the Trust budget?
Well, don't forget, Jeremy Hunt failed to become leader. By the way, I'm an admirer of Jeremy Hunt. Let's be quite clear about this. But it doesn't mean I think he's a great chancellor. He's a chancellor by accident, and he basically had to sign up to what is really a Rishi Sunak treasury. Now, look, Rishi Sunak has many great advantages, and I'm told he's got the best swimming pool in England. But I have to tell you, I don't think Rishi Sunak is a man with great passionate beliefs.
No.
Mrs. Thatcher was Prime Minister of this country for 11 years, and I was one of her ministers for 9. I sometimes wake up and think, how can we have gone from Mrs. Thatcher to really a conviction-free politician like Rishi?
Yeah. A globalist technocrat. I mean, Lord Bilimoria, what does this mean for business now? Because you see AstraZeneca deciding to relocate to Ireland because of corporation tax. I mean, is that going to happen with many more businesses? And do you think there's the possibility that the government might actually see sense before the next election?
I'll actually go one step further than David. I think that the government needs to be much bolder.
Yeah.
There is no sense of urgency. All these childcare reforms,
I agree.
They're going to start next in August and then phased in and eventually into 2025. Lifelong learning account. We need to skill up our workforce. That was announced before this budget. It's only going to start next year. Why not now? Small modular reactors, nuclear reactors.
Totally, just do it.
People. They can be built with 5
just
years.
Do it.
They have to start.
Hallelujah.
There needs to be a sense of urgency here. There needs to be a boldness to go for growth, to encourage small and medium-sized enterprises. Where's the IRS 35 to be reformed to encourage
I know. That was one of the best things. That was one of the best things in the Kwarteng mini-budget, the reform of IR 35. That wasn't even spoken about today. So, Greg Smith, is there a lack of urgency in the Conservative Party now? And what are backbenchers like you going to do to get Sunak and Hunt to realise they don't have a lock on this leadership? You know, Boris Johnson, depending on, and I know David Maller's going to hate this concept, but depending on what happens at the Privileges Committee next week, Boris Johnson is stalking them.
Look, I think that there's got to be a greater sense of urgency. Jeremy, as he delivered his budget statement earlier, did hint at greater things to come in the autumn statement, but that may well be too late. I think one of the most pressing and urgent reforms we need to make, though, is to get ourselves out of the straitjacket that is the OBR. So long as we continue to take as gospel what this organisation that has never knowingly been right, they were 70 billion quid out on last March's budget. We'll wait to see how much out they are in their forecast this time. So long as we are absolutely held to their false forecasts that are never ever right, we are never going to get.
Couldn't agree more on that. Couldn't agree more. Greg Smith, the MP for Buckingham, alongside the chairman of Cobra Bearer and former vice president of the CBI, Lord Karen Bilimoria, former Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Tory grandee David Maller, and the brilliant columnist and parliamentary sketchwriter at the Daily Telegraph, Madeline Grant. Thank you all. But who do you agree with on this? As Chancellor Jeremy Hunt hikes corporation tax, fails to slash any levies for hard-working Brits, was today's budget for growth a success or failure? Well, Ali on Twitter says Liz Truss had the right idea, but they wanted her out. Now we have a budget for stagnation. Who's going to want to invest in Britain with corporation tax that high? Hear, hear. On email, Michael writes, today's budget is an abdication of political responsibility. Hunt is a socialist masquerading as a Conservative. Where have all the Conservatives gone? And from Malcolm, the grin on Slippery Starmer's face said it all. Hunt and the Tories have done themselves no favours today. And with an election coming up next year, that is very dangerous indeed. And your verdict is now in. 22% of you say Hunt's budget was a success. 78% of you believe it was a failure. Wow. Still to come. As J.K. Rowling admits she knew Potter fans would be deeply unhappy with her trans views, should we applaud the author for putting her principles above popularity? Former Education Minister Andrea Jenkins, who wanted to meet with the author turned feminist warrior before woke civil servants stepped in to stop her, is going to be live with me on this in the studio. But next, the journalist and royal author Angela Levin asks if Fergie's sudden fondness for Meghan Markle is a sign of the Sussex PR machine going into overdrive ahead of the coronation. I'll see you in 3.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners on TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island's story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Now, Sarah Ferguson has just returned from Los Angeles, where she was carrying out a stack of promotion events for her new historical romantic novel. Of course she was. But has Fergie fallen for the Montecito high life during her visit? Because in an interview with the Press Association, she said of the Sussexes, I believe very strongly that I have absolutely no judgment on any other person's life, and I look at how much Meghan loves Harry and loves the children and gives him a love that he's never had before. Well, I'm joined now by Prince Harry's biographer and top royal expert Angela Levin. I mean, look, it's so rare for any member of the firm to speak out about Harry and Meghan in this way. This is all very complicated anyway, because just a few days earlier, Fergie had said that she barely knows Meghan. And now she believes that Meghan gives Harry a love he's never had before. Really? Because I look back and I think Harry was very much in love and very happy, actually, with his former girlfriends. And now he looks miserable.
Yes. Well, it's very interesting, isn't it? Because less than a week ago, she was saying she didn't know them, she hardly been there. But I wonder whether Eugenie, her daughter, told her to boost it up. because she's friendly with them, or they told her. But she was actually full of praise, how wonderful they are, saying ludicrous things. I think it was a bit like a magic story in a family that actually she sort of thinks she'd like to write about, which is not true at all. But I think she felt that Diana would be very, very proud of the 2 children. How would she know that if she doesn't even know them? And also...
Do you think that's true?
Well, no,
Do you
I was
think
going to say,
Diana would
absolutely, Diana would be horrified that they hadn't seen their paternal family, because she, although she didn't work well for her in the royal family, she did absolutely love it, and she was brought up to be very respectful, and she was. So that's a very odd thing to say.
She never attacked the institution.
Never. No.
And Diana would be utterly mortified at the idea of Harry, who was meant to be there in her mind as a constant support for Prince William before he became king, with Harry actually trying to destroy his reputation.
Yeah, she would have actually got their heads and banged them together.
Yeah.
She would be so upset, because her whole life was based on the fact that she wanted them to be close, and they were very close. Harry said to me when I was writing his biography, every year they got closer and closer, and they could really feel they could say anything to each other, and now it's just horrendous. The other thing about a good wife or any partner is that you help them overcome things.
Yeah.
And Meghan has not done that. I mean, I think she should have said, don't talk about drugs, my darling, because you might find it difficult to get back into America. You know, don't actually look as if you're incredibly unhappy. What can I do to help cheer you up? But he looks worse and worse. He looks quite ill. He looks as if there's nothing going on inside him. Whereas I was looking some pictures that I took of him in 2018, and his face was full, he was happy, and also the nonsense that he's had love more than any other love he's had before. I mean, he's infatuated by her, but he was very happy with his previous girlfriend, who was out with for 8 years, and he wrote to his father, Chelsea Davy, and he wrote to his father to say, this is the one, she's the one for me. And Charles wrote back, this is what Harry told me, Charles wrote back and said, go easy. Don't go. He was very young. Don't rush for it. Take it easy. Life changes. Actually, he would have, exactly.
What a shame. I mean, if he had married Chelsea, he would probably have been a much happier, more content person still in the royal family today. Is it true, Angela, that you say Harry is quite obviously scared of Meghan?
Yes.
What do you mean by that?
Well, I think it's well known that Meghan is delightful unless you say something she doesn't want you to say, and then she's really scary. And I think he is frightened of her, because the way he looks at her, he doesn't want to say something if she wants to speak. If she wants to talk to someone before him, he steps back. He's very nervous. And I think that she commands it all, quite obviously, because this is not the Harry he was a few years ago. And the only reason he's not like that is he's following the request of Meghan. He said himself, what Meghan wants, Meghan gets. And that's what it's like. And it's a tragedy, really, because I think that he lets her say and do things that anyone else would say, no, this isn't how it works, this is wrong.
And we have to be honest, the Sussex's PR team has clearly gone into overdrive here. They didn't like the fact that Fergie was distancing herself from Meghan. Clearly there's been a word in her ear, say something nice about them.
Yeah.
As you say, it may have come via Eugenie, because we know how close Eugenie is with the pair. But I'd actually like to know Fergie's real views about the Sussexes, because I think what we've seen here is the PR spin, Angela.
Yeah, I think the first time she said it, that was her. I mean, but we don't know, because Meghan said to Oprah Winfrey, she taught me how to curtsy in 2016 when I was going to see the Queen. Now, that's very odd, because, if they talked and they had a meal together afterwards in the Windsor Lodge with Prince Andrew.
Yeah, but
so
it makes no...
I think all that was, she wasn't that keen. She believes in family, Fergie.
And I have a feeling Fergie was operating on the concept of, if you don't have something nice to say about your family members, don't say anything at all. And that's why she was trying to distance herself, because, of course, she'll be very disappointed at the way that Harry and Meghan have both tried to attack Sandra as well.
But you have to say about her that even though they're divorced, they are a close family and the girls still love her and all that. So she's done that very well and she believes very strongly in that. She adored the Queen, who she said was a much better mother than her own mother. So I think she would be horrified by what they've done, to be so rude for her when she was so ill.
No, I'd like to have an off-the-record conversation with Fergie, actually, to hear what
Good
she
idea.
really thinks.
Good idea.
11. We will speak next week, Angela. Thank you so much. But coming up, with the mother of missing Claudia Lawrence slamming the BBC for sending through demands for her daughter to continue paying the licence fee, is this more proof of why it should be scrapped? My Superstar panel thrashed that one out after I deliver the first of tomorrow's front pages just after 10. But first, from J.K. Rowling to Hugh Grant, Tory MP and former Education Minister Andrea Jenkins joins me live in the studio to go through the cultural conflicts next.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit off.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. My exclusive sit-down with the former Home Secretary, Priti Patel, coming up. But first, the world's most successful author, J.K. Rowling, has finally addressed the vicious trans backlash against her stance on the rights of biological women, explaining her side of the story in the podcast The Witch Trials of J.K. Rowling.
I absolutely knew that if I spoke out, many people who had loved my books would be deeply unhappy with me. I was considerate enough to phone my management team and say, you cannot argue me out of this. And I read out what I was about to say because I felt they needed warning. Time will tell whether I've got this wrong. I can only say that I've thought about it deeply and I've listened, I promise, to the other side. And I believe absolutely that there is something dangerous about this movement and it must be challenged.
Isn't she brilliant? Thankfully, the vicious Rowling phobia aimed at the author doesn't seem to have knocked her off course. And I'm delighted to be joined now live in the studio by another strong woman who certainly isn't afraid of winding up the woke mob. It is the Tory MP, former Education Minister, Andrea Jenkins. So I really think we have to applaud J.K. Rowling for putting her principles above popularity here.
Completely agree. I take my hat off to her. She's a ballsy woman and she's got principles. And, I mean, regarding the whole trans debate, I was taking the freedom of speech bill through Parliament, was due to, and I was really desperate to meet J.K. Rowling and hear what she's really been through. And, unfortunately, the department kept thinking of excuses, pushing back, and yeah, so I never got a chance to meet her, unfortunately.
So they're the sort of blob, your civil servants?
Yes, most definitely.
And do you think that was because they are infected by what Elon Musk describes as the woke mind virus?
I think, without a doubt, Dan. I mean,
I'm more than happy to have ministers meeting Bill Gates all the time, so why not J.K. Rowling?
Completely. I mean, regarding the trans debate, though, I think she's spot on.
Yes.
To me, I don't care how people want to live their lives. Life's too short. Be happy. But if you've got a tackle, you shouldn't be in a women's changing room, in a women's prison. And the fact of the matter is, to me, there's two genders, male and female, and a woman can be ballsy, but they ain't got balls.
Very well put, I agree. The Gary Lineker lunacy, though, that rocked Parliament this week, continued overnight with the DUP politician Sammy Wilson calling for an end to the compulsory licence fee. Watch this.
The BBC has shown once again it's impossible, because of the bias inherent within it, to be impartial. And it is now time that the BBC is no longer forced to finance, or people are no longer forced to finance the BBC through the licence fee.
Something that we are considering, not least because there are fewer people now paying the licence fee. We are concerned that the public is losing support for the licence fee.
So she says the public are losing support for the licence fee. I mean, hasn't this whole woke stunt by Lineker and his mob of millionaire champagne-swilling socialists actually backfired spectacularly?
Oh, completely, Dan. I mean, I've been part of the Defund the campaign, Defund the BBC campaign for years now, and
Good on you.
I think it's a regressive form of taxation which hits the poorest. And you see those who go to court, it's the poorest people who can't afford to pay. And it's not with the Times. Why can't they make the money out of advertising like other broadcasters? And I'd like to see our Conservative government before the end of Parliament to defund the BBC.
Now, look, I've got to talk to you about your old mate, Hugh Grant. He has rubbed so many people up the wrong way over the years, including you, Andrew. But look at what he did this week, the misery gas.
What are you most excited to see tonight?
To see?
Yeah, well, I know that you probably watched a few of the movies. Are you excited to see anybody win? Do you have your hopes up for anyone?
No one in particular.
What does it feel like to be in Glass Onion? It was such an amazing film. I really loved it. I love a thriller. How fun is it to shoot something like that?
Well, I'm barely in it. I'm in it for about 3 seconds.
Yeah, but still, you showed up and you had fun, right?
Almost.
Okay, all right. Okay. Well, thank you so much. It was nice to talk to you.
Yeah.
Now, Andrew, you've had your own battle with Hugh Grant after his response, a catty response to this memorable moment outside Downing Street last year, and he really came for you, didn't he? So, what is it about this bloke? He's the meanest man in showbiz, isn't he?
I mean, Dan, look, in the 90s, he was my rom-com hero. And when
he was good in Bridget Jones, wasn't he?
He certainly was, yeah. And when I took to social media and saw the real him that is actually a grumpy, sanctimonious old sod, it shattered my illusions.
He swore at you? He spoke about a rude sexual act?
Yeah, I mean, I pulled him up on that. But when he tweeted about me, I did think touche. You know, it's, you know, fair play, he did have a point. But regarding that interview that he did, I mean, it was a silly question.
She wasn't the sharpest tool in the shed.
No, exactly. And
but he was there to be asked silly questions on the Oscar red carpet, you know.
Absolutely.
Wasn't at the United Nations.
He could have been a lot more politer and a lot more accommodating and nice and decent. But I do recall that I've pulled a similar face during Theresa May's PMQ when she said that Brexit means Brexit, Dan. So, you know, we do pull funny faces at times if we're expressive.
Andrew Jenkins, thank you so much. Brilliant to have you here.
Thank you, Dan.
But coming up, as High Tax Hunt lays out his first full budget just as the party gets serious about illegal migration, tune in for my exclusive interview with the former Home Secretary Priti Patel, who delivers her bombshell verdict on the budget and stopping the boats. But first, as cruel BBC staff hound Claudia Lawrence for her licence fee over 13 years after she tragically disappeared, is this just another example of why this compulsory poll tax must be scrapped altogether? My superstar panel are going to have their say next. We're back in just 2 minutes' time.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 10 p.m. I'm Dan Wootton. Tonight, as High Tax Hunt delivers his so-called budget for growth, I get the frank and honest verdict of the former Home Secretary Priti Patel.
Corporation tax is a big issue and it's here to stay and it's not going to go away, and he's heard me say as well, I'm going to continue making the representations, but we've got to flip this round.
Don't miss more from my exclusive interview with one of the Conservative Party's sharpest political minds, making a rare intervention on the budget and the illegal migration crisis very shortly. As boxing promoter Frank Warren delivers a knockout blow to the virtue signaller-in-chief Gary Lineker.
How on earth can you compare us as a nation with them? Gary Lineker. Him.
So is the millionaire loudmouth sounding a death knell for the British bashing corporation. Former BBC employee Nana Akua, who was the victim of a vile online attack by Saint Lineker, she's going to pull no punches tonight, uncancelled. Plus, the shocking behaviour of BBC vultures trying to fund Lineker's obscene salary. 14 years after Claudia Lawrence vanished, the corporation still hounding the missing person for a TV licence at her cottage in York. Can you believe it? So, as Claudia's family face that terrible ordeal, is this more proof why the licence fee must be axed? That's the big debate with my superstar panel next. Tonight, I'm joined by Dawn Neeson, Dominique Samuels and Nigel Nelson. And with Budget Day overshadowing the 500,000 public sector workers on strike, has the latest instalment of Walkout Wednesday been an outright failure? We're going to debate that in the media buzz. A brand new Greatest Britain Union jackass named before the night is out too. And first front pages, hot off the press. They're going to be up in mere moments. First though, Molly Milhurst.
Dan, thank you, and good evening to you. And of course, today, Budget Day, and the Chancellor Jeremy Hunt was vowed to encourage millions to rejoin the workforce to boost Britain's financial growth in his first budget as Chancellor. Mr Hunt said the Office for Budget Responsibility now forecasts the UK will no longer enter a recession this year. Instead, inflation is predicted to fall from 10.7% at the end of last year to 2.9% at the end of 2023. Well, let's bring you those points that came through in the budget. And the measures include a reduction in duty paid on draft beer and cider.
Apologies for that. She's looking very beautiful tonight, our Polly Milhurst, but sadly we couldn't hear her. So let's do tomorrow's news tonight now in the Media Buzz. And the Metro leads with the Easy Does It budget as it reports Jeremy Hunt's pledge to, quote, ease the country back to work while avoiding a recession this year. Can we see the Metro? If not, oh, there we go. There we go. My superstar panel back with me now. Hopefully we can hear them. Former Daily Star editor Dawn Neeson. Maybe not, actually. Maybe it would be better. Political commentator Dominique Samuels and the political editor of the Sunday Mirror and Sunday People, Nigel Nelson. Now, slippery Starmer tried and failed to land a blow on the Tories today by accusing them of attacking free speech in the BBC's Gary Lineker row, forgetting it was his party who initially condemned the tweets.
Rather than blame everyone else, why doesn't he take some responsibility, stand up to his snowflake MPs waging war on free speech?
Mr. Speaker, it's just the usual political opportunism from the leader of the Labour Party. I don't know if he knows this, but actually first the Shadow Attorney General and then the Shadow Home Secretary actually criticised the language that had been used in the tweet.
But while the BBC cleans up the mess of one embarrassing scandal, they were also dealing with another shameful episode today. It's been 14 years since the tragic chef Claudia Lawrence went missing, but heartache came flooding back to her devastated family this week, all thanks to the vultures at the corporation. Disgracefully, the BBC is hounding Claudia for a TV licence at her cottage in York, despite cops sparking a murder probe after she vanished without trace in 2009. Her distraught mum, Joan, who my heart goes out to her, said, there was a letter recently threatening a £1,000 fine if the licence wasn't paid. It's unbelievable. I've written to them to tell them what's happened and the police are supposed to be sorting it out, but the letters still come. Receiving these letters causes me untold heartache. Now, the BBC apologised. They claimed the letters hadn't been sent in Claudia's name and it's promised to stop after being told the house was empty. But Joan's appalling treatment heaps more pressure on the fumbling corporation to have its licence fee scrapped, not least after the shambolic Lineker affair. So, Dawn, is this more proof that defunding the BBC needs to be a top political priority?
I think Gary Lineker has done a wonderful thing. He's done us all a huge favour, don't you? I mean, he is the new DG of the BBC, isn't he? I mean, what he says goes. I mean, the BBC have absolutely no testicles whatsoever standing up to him. He can get away with what he'd want. He's paid £1.35 million a year on top of the 1.3 million he gets for flogging crisps in an obesity crisis. But this is appalling. And in 2020, 52,000 people were fined by the BBC, 76% of them women. Probably vulnerable women as well. And I just think it's appalling that we are paying for a company that can't even control their employees, i.e. Gary Lineker. I mean, it's just, you know, on the very day Tim Davie, the current Director General, come out and said, we are working together now and Gary's promised to be a good boy and not doing it. Gary was back out there tweeting again, being as political as he likes.
Indeed. And Dominique, I mean, I don't think any of us should have to pay this poll tax. It's actually sick that in 2023, simply watch any television station in the UK, you have to pay this licence fee. It's the way, though, that they hound and they hector and they don't care about people's personal circumstances. I mean, come on, Claudia Lawrence, she's been missing for 13 years. Give it up. But it's not just missing people. It's people who are in poverty. It's the elderly who are faced between turning their TV off for good or heating their homes. I actually think they are an inhumane organisation.
Yeah, I mean, it's completely dystopian, the idea that you must enforce this licence fee for many people that don't actually use most of the BBC's services. And really, I mean, this might be slightly controversial for those that claim that the BBC is one of the 8th wonders of the world. But I think the whole idea of having a state broadcaster is quite dystopian, to be honest. I agree. Because, you know, actually looking at the content it pumps out, a lot of it is biased. I don't think any of it really serves the public very well. And particularly during the course of the lockdowns that were going on, there was no, you know, journalistic integrity. Even recently, the BBC posted an article claiming that the pandemic had a minimal impact on mental health.
Right.
A very clickbaity headline. Then when you scroll through the headline, you find out that the review that they're promoting actually didn't focus on any of the vulnerable groups, which is how they came to their conclusion. And I think looking at that, there are some real problems with the BBC, and as a result, of course, the licence fee should be decriminalised, of course.
Nigel Nelson, how can you justify the way that the BBC hounds folk who are unable to pay their revolting tax, including missing Claudia Lawrence?
Yeah, I wouldn't defend it at all. But bear in mind, it's not the BBC, it's an outside agency that actually deals with this. I've had letters like that myself. I lived in it when I was living in London.
Have I.
Yeah, I get exactly the same letters.
Threatening. They hunt you down.
Yep, threatening. But it turned out I was living in a block of flats where there were 4 flats. They kept sending it to flat 5, and unless there were people on the roof, there was no flat 5 in this block. They kept sending the letters. I kept telling them there was no flat 5. They carried on threatening until I wrote about them in the newspaper. They didn't stop.
Yeah. And Dawn is right, isn't she, Dominique, in that Lineker is actually, he's leaning in to his power now. He's saying to Tim Davie, I'm ignoring your rules. I'm going to continue to be partisan. I'm going to continue to be political. And my little woke mob of multi-millionaire virtue signaller presenters are going to follow me. And so Davie is now stuck between a rock and a hard place. He has lost control of the organisation.
Completely lost control, and lost control of those that the BBC employs, because Gary Lineker feels absolutely untouchable. He's been pumped up by the rabid left, in my opinion. They've been making this some sort of free speech issue. Whenever there's an actual free speech issue, though, these very same people are really quite silent. But all of a sudden, you know, Gary Lineker is this martyr. And if this continues, the situation will only get worse. I'm not sure what they can do, because the left have been radicalised into believing that the BBC is some sort of fog-on for the right, whilst the right believe that the BBC, because of people like Lineker, are a fog-on for the left.
Yeah, but that's
all in all, something's going to have to change.
Yeah, that's for sure. Now, look, Carol Vorderman's reputation for sticking it to the man has come under scrutiny after being snapped with the disgraced Matt Hancock at the Cheltenham Festival. In recent months, you might know that Carol has savaged Hancock by calling him a liar and disgusting, don't disagree with any of that, by the way, and having to play on his surname in a series of scathing social media posts about the Tories. But these shots appear to show her happily chatting with the shamed former Health Secretary and his lover Gina Coladangelo yesterday. It sparked a wave of criticism from fans who accused her of being two-faced. Here's how Vorderman explained herself last night.
Looking out at the course, tap on the shoulder. Hello, my name's Gina. And then I turned around, it's Matt Hancock. Hello, my name's Matt. Hello, I'm Matt. I went, oh, hello, I'm Carol. This is my friend Jules. What are you meant to do? You're in the Royal Box. You can't call them in the Royal Box, can you?
Our own Dominique Samuels weighed in with this tweet saying, Vorderman schmoozing with Hancock, where she thinks nobody will notice, but plays the whistleblower online. Comical. So, Dominique, have you changed your mind after seeing Carol's explanation?
Oh, come on, I've not changed my mind at all. That is a complete cop-out, and I think the lady doth protest too much. Because we saw the pictures. You were laughing, you were joking, you were schmoozing. That is what was happening. And the thing is, what I think is so duplicitous about this is Carol's come out on social media, you know, sticking it to the Tories. She's talking about corruption. She's had some very harsh words for Hancock. But actually, when it comes down to it, these people... They're all in the same club. They're all in it together, and online they show a different face. And it is comical. And I, for one, was not convinced by Carol when it emerged that really she's just a Labour Party activist. But hopefully with these pictures, more people will actually see it's just a game for these people, and it's also really primarily about attention.
Dawn, you're friends with Carol. Do you want to stand up for her here?
Yeah, I do. I do respect Carol. I respect a lot what she's done. And I also understand where she was coming from. If someone... And it was very public. I mean, it's not like she was trying to hide, was it? It's like, you're tapped on the shoulder, and if you're a certain generation, you're polite. If someone starts talking to me, I'm not going to tell them to go away. I'm going to start...
No, she feels that passionately about this issue, though. She should confront him. I would.
Yeah. I would as well.
No, I would have actually said
something. After those lockdown files, come on.
I would have actually said something, and we don't know that she didn't. She hasn't said that. But he started talking about dyslexia, which is a cause that Carol has championed from day one.
Oh, yeah.
So, and then she turned...
I think she probably should have mentioned him wanting to block funding for disabled kids.
Yeah, no, she probably should have done, but she was there. I get the fact that it was very hard for her to
Nigel has an
out.
interesting take on this, because your lovely wife, a senior, successful, Conservative Party advisor.
Indeed.
So how do you deal with this stuff? Because you must have all of your lefty mates. She has all of her right-wing mates. What do you do in these situations when you've written something horrible?
We all get on. And this is the point about the Carol Vorderman thing. That if you run... you know, I've written some pretty nasty things about Tories in my time.
Oh, yes, you have.
When I run into them, I'm polite, we get on. It's understood that I'm doing my job, they're doing theirs.
This is a weird thing, though, because she wasn't just being a journalist. She called him a series of names. And if you actually look at the pictures, it wasn't just a bit of conversation. It was ha, 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 hee, hee, hee. Like, it was very obvious what was going on.
But let's be honest, that's what celebrities are like, right?
Yeah.
They're all fake. They all pretend to like each other. Believe me, the vast majority of them slag the person off the moment they turn the other way.
I thought you really liked that.
But in this case, I think Vorders, and, you know, I like the woman, but I think actually she has to now practice what she preaches. And this was an opportunity for her to prove to the public that she would stand up to Hancock in the same way that she has online.
Slap him around the face?
No, but say to him, you have been exposed. I want to do an interview with you here and now.
But this was a
Get
social
her
meeting,
mobile
wasn't it?
phone out.
I mean, a straightforward social meeting. Aren't you just sort of polite?
Well, just turn the other way then. Just turn the other way.
I'm sorry.
You know, I saw Hancock at a concert last year after I'd done my big toe-to-toe with him here, and I just said to my friend, I'm going the other direction. I do not want to speak to this man in a social situation because I'll say something I regret.
If he'd have tapped you on the shoulder, what would you have done?
I'd say, I really don't want to talk to you now.
Right.
Because he's a slime ball.
Would have asked for an interview or something
I just had one, and I knew that this bloke was a complete lying.
Probably won't be getting another one now.
No, that's for sure. Nigel Nelson, Dominique Samuels, Dawn Neeson, do stand by, because coming up, have the Marxist unions' selfish strikes, which were largely shrugged off by a wary British public today, ultimately failed? My superstar panel are going to return to debate that soon. But next, on the day of Jeremy Hunt's big British budget and with a migrant crisis in full swing, the former Home Secretary, Priti Patel, gives her expert opinion on the new financial details revealed, including that corporation tax rise and the boats. My exclusive sit-down with the former Home Secretary coming up in just a couple of minutes.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes & Co.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Click that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes & Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akua, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today.
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome back, and it's time now for my exclusive Budget Day sit-down with the former Home Secretary, Priti Patel. One of the Conservative Party's sharpest political minds and most popular names has made this rare intervention into day-to-day politics from her Westminster office this evening after high-tax Jeremy Hunt ignored her pleas to axe the historic and, in my opinion, very stupid hike in corporation tax. Priti Patel, great to be here. You are a low-tax Tory in your bones. You campaigned against the rise in corporation tax. So how do you feel about Jeremy Hunt's budget today?
So, Dan, thank you for coming over to Westminster today. And obviously it's budget day. There is a lot going on. There've been many announcements around the budget. But you're absolutely right. You know, as a Thatcherite Conservative, a low-tax Conservative, I always speak about, you know, the plight of hard-pressed taxpayers. There are some really important things, actually, that have been announced today around taxation, in particular business taxes. And of course, I have been campaigning to actually stop the corporation tax increases. And importantly, alongside that, there's another corporation tax measure, which is the OECD minimum rate of corporation tax, which is really problematic because actually that impacts upon our tax sovereignty and the ability of our government to determine our rates of corporation tax.
Which is the whole point that we voted to leave the European Union.
And to take back control, and Brexit. So today's announcements obviously have big implications, but you are also aware that the Chancellor has announced a package of £9 billion of support for businesses.
Which was positive.
So it is positive, and I've spoken in the debate today as well, but I think there are some important things that we should actually, some pointers, some questions that still need to be asked about this. Number one, to lower taxes, we need simpler taxes. We don't need to bring in more burdens, bureaucracy, regulations, so that you put taxes up over here and then say, we'll do a bit of an umbrella by bringing in various measures to soften it. Because all that means is that, quite frankly, all the businesses, it's different if you're a large corporate or corporation. If you're a SME in Wootton or Essex or anywhere around the country, you don't have the time all the resources to employ more tax specialists, more lawyers, to actually look at all of that. You need cash, you need money basically to get on, invest, grow your business, etc., etc. So I am concerned about that, and I have said that today as well.
And you spoke with Jeremy Hunt personally,
So
didn't you?
I have, absolutely. I actually saw Jeremy Hunt, and I also spoke in the debate today, and the Chancellor was there.
Is he listening to you?
I'm going to give Jeremy a lot of credit, actually. Jeremy's been very good to work with in the run-up to the budget. He does listen and he does engage, and he knows effectively the case that I've been making, not just on the increase of corporation tax, but also the implications of the OECD rate, the minimum rate of corporation tax, because as we know, our friends around the world are basically, they press the pause button on it. So the challenge back, and I've said it again today to Jeremy, is that we cannot keep on trying to be the first mover on this. There's no benefit for us. By all means, carry on doing the work if you have to. We should not be rushing into this at all. I mean, I just don't think we should be doing this full stop. I'm very clear about that. We should be an independent government when it comes to taxation. We should be sovereign in control of our own taxes. Ironically, in the same way in which both the Chancellor and the Prime Minister are referring to tax decisions in Northern Ireland now, post the Windsor Agreement. So, you know, we have got more work to do on this. I believe that, you know, the Conservative Party is nothing if we do not stand up for low taxes.
No,
but
and there's
with
an
that,
election.
Dan,
There's an election coming up, and that is one of my concerns. How do you differentiate yourself from Labour when there are a lot of big state policies and high tax policies?
Well, I believe we can. For a start, we can. We're not like Labour in so many ways. We're just not like Labour. But I was going to say that, you know, the key thing about being, you know, Conservatives is sound money. And that also means, I'm afraid, tackling some of the hard things, you know, state spending, size of the state, debt to GDP ratio, for example. And that is where we have to focus. And you can only do that by growing the economy, creating more jobs, support for businesses, lower taxes. And I think we are at that stage right now where we've got to get that rebalancing right. So Jeremy's on the right pathway. Corporation tax is a big issue, and it's here to stay, and it's not going to go away. And he's heard me say as well, I'm going to continue making the representations. But we've got to flip this round, because currently, as we know, debt up here, that's government borrowing, everything else, government spending, a reflection of how much government is spending. A tax take, businesses, etc. Businesses still being clobbered, and we're not growing the base enough.
It wasn't all negative today by any means. Some real positives. One that you have been campaigning hard on relates to fuel duty.
That's right.
And it was frozen again, which was a huge relief to me, because it does feel like around the world there is an increasing war on the motorist.
So I agree. I always have done on this. And, you know, you've got to remember, back in the day, I was Exchequer Secretary a long time ago. I've had the privilege of working in the Treasury. These things are difficult to square and balance. But at the end of the day, the good things that have come out of this budget are in relation to people. And that is hard-pressed motorists. We have to stand up for them. There's no doubt about that. We need them. They're the backbone to our economy. They employ people. They create jobs. And again, you know, white van man, for want of a better term, people that get up at the crack of dawn, get in their motors and actually drive into London to work.
Yeah, and Sadiq Khan wants to make their life miserable.
And that's, you asked about the differentiation between Labour. ULEZ, you know, rotten London Labour boroughs, policies like ULEZ, that's effectively discriminatory against hard-pressed motorists, People that go to work every single day, get in their vans, provide goods and services to London, to buildings like this, to restaurants, to hotels, the carpenters, the plumbers, etc. We have to be their voice and we have to be their champion.
So that was a positive. And I also thought the pension reform was a step in the right direction too. Do you agree?
Totally. And that's why I say people, their savings, giving us the freedom to get on and live our lives, unshackling us from those regulations.
Also positive, the childcare reforms, which seems to have really taken the wind out of Slippery Starmer's sails today.
So I think this is, it's very important. Back in the day, I set up the policy around tax-free childcare. Which was complex and difficult, and it's moved on, and obviously it's now going really well. This is about broadening now through the age range of children and parents and households that can qualify for it. Childcare costs a fortune. In some parts of the country, it's the equivalent to a mortgage.
So you've given Hunt a pass mark.
So I think Jeremy has done a really good job, actually, off the back of, number one, an OBR, let's remember this, last November, that read like, doom and gloom encyclopedia, so pessimistic. And I say this, having been a Treasury Minister, I've experienced a few fiscal events, while also getting the balance right so we can support businesses and individuals.
Now, look, we need to talk about migration. OBR figures released today show 250,000 net migration. Looks like it's going to become a regular thing. Now, of course, that issue is being very much conflated with the scourge of the people smugglers and the illegal immigration, which obviously we can't deal with as a country. So are you concerned about this 250,000 figure, or do you think we're getting the right people in legally?
So it's twofold. Number one, we must never conflate, legitimate migration, legal migration with illegal migration. Illegal migration is literally the broken system, the people smugglers, all the work that the government is working on now and the work that I was doing as well, and I'll come on to that in a minute. Legal migration was the points-based immigration system, the reforms that we brought in, 2019 general election when we said we'd have an Australian-style points-based immigration system. We now have a British points-based immigration system, and I think people have forgotten about that.
Because we're getting the right people in.
So the purpose of that system is that you have to be sponsored by an employer. We've always said, you have to be sponsored. It's about your skills. It's not where you came from. It's not about the colour of your passport. You remember how EU citizens were favoured compared to the rest of the world. High-skilled individuals with the type of skills that we do not have in this country. And by the way, Dan, they pay the immigration health surcharge, which is in the thousands of pounds, their visas. They tend to be very significant net contributors to our economy because they pay their taxes. And many of them in the skills sector are high-rate taxpayers. So actually, we should be thinking about the contribution they make.
Obviously, as you point out, the big problem is illegal migration, and you must know the concerns of your constituents. Hotels overflowing, it's costing us so much money, communities are being torn apart. Obviously, you created the Rwanda scheme, which has thus far been scuppered. Do you think the government is on the right track when it comes to stopping the boats?
So importantly, on the Economic Migration Partnership with Rwanda, that is the first ever in the world, and it will be world class. It's been established for very good reasons, primarily because I wanted to raise the bar around this entire debate and narrative around resettlement and refugees. There is a view in the world, and actually it stems from Europe as well, that there is a fixed way of how we address illegal migration and refugees, and I think they've got it wrong. The European Union got it completely wrong. And Rwanda, they are a fantastic partner in the way in which they believe in investing in the individuals that are resettled in Rwanda. We invest in their skills. That is the money that we've given the government of Rwanda in terms of housing, skills training and development so that they can resettle and rebuild their lives there. That is a good thing. And we've set the bar, I think, pretty high internationally. Whereas
so it's a humane policy, isn't it?
It's firm, Dan, it's firm, very firm, but it's fair.
And make sure you're here tomorrow for more of my exclusive sit-down with the former Home Secretary Priti Patel, where she'll give her bombshell take on the Boris witch hunt.
The lack of transparency, the lack of accountability. I think there is a culture of collusion, quite frankly.
Begum's bid to return to Britain. When you were Home Secretary, you were absolutely clear that this woman must not re-enter the UK. Do you stand by those
Absolutely
comments?
right, absolutely right.
And her verdict on a certain BBC presenter.
I've experienced such comments from him as well when I was Home Secretary.
She's talking about Gary Lineker, I think. You really don't want to miss the rest of that blockbuster interview here tomorrow night. But coming up in Uncancelled, broadcaster Nana Akua is here to ask if Lineker's latest run-ins with Jonathan Gullis and Frank Warren have further damaged the crumbling reputation of the British bashing corporation. But next in the media buzz, as Budget Day strikes met with public indifference, tonight's Superstar panel will debate whether the overlooked industrial action has failed. That's straight after the break.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Let's return to tomorrow's news tonight now in our media buzz. More front pages have been delivered, and The Guardian leads with Chancellor Jeremy Hunt's budget handing pension giveaways to the wealthiest 1% to help stem the tide of people leaving the workforce. The Independent also leads with today's budget, highlighting which levies will be slashed, scrapped and extended. And The Express says Hunt promised a brighter future for Britain as he sees off recession, declaring that the stronger than expected economy is proving the doubters wrong. The newspaper reports on this stealthy 4p rise in income tax, with Britain's tax burden rising to a new record high since World War II. And I have to say, for one of the only times in recent weeks, the Eye has got the story from the budget correct. More on the Media Buzz now with tonight's superstar panel. Former Daily Star editor, current columnist there, Dawn Neeson, the political commentator, Dominique Samuels, and the political editor of the Sunday Mirror and Sunday People, Nigel Nelson. Now, mass walkouts across the UK today have seen a staggering 500,000 public sector workers down tools, as the most widespread strike action in over a decade saw teachers, transport workers, junior doctors and even civil servants join the picket lines. The disgraceful union barons who have spent months already holding the British public to ransom made the decision to run strike action in an arrogant attempt, I believe, to overshadow Hunt's first full budget. But this misguided effort to belittle the budget has actually failed, with the walkouts largely shrugged off by politicians and the public alike. I firmly believe Britons are now suffering from strike fatigue due to the constant waves of industrial action that are plaguing the country, which is bad news for those pesky union bosses. And I think, Dawn, these strikes have failed, actually. The unions were hoping to create a winter of discontent. But the thing is, because everyone just loves to work from home now, on the whole, the country hasn't been impacted in the same way that we may have been in the 70s and 80s.
And you know what? A lot of people weren't even aware of it. It was like, you know, we had the winter of discontent back when I was a kid in the 70s, and now this is a spring of, oh, right, they're on strike again. Let's just make the most of it. And that's exactly what it is. And as for the civil servants going on strike, I mean, would anyone actually notice? They're all working from home.
I know.
And the blob does need cutting down, let's be fair. So I think, they've got to be careful, because they're going to be striking themselves out of jobs as well. You know, if you can do without the tubes and getting on the British Underground, on British Rail or whatever it's called these days, then you're going to do it. You're going to make alternative arrangements.
Well, exactly. It's continued that sense of lockdown, hasn't it, Dominique, which actually, unfortunately, some folk really seem to want to embrace.
Yeah, I mean, people have just gotten used to the disruption now. They've gotten used to things not working. They've gotten used to people that work for the public sector not working. And I think most people, although they may sympathise with, what the teachers and others are saying, they're sort of ambivalent towards it, because really they're preoccupied with their own problems. They're preoccupied themselves with inflation, with, wondering how they're going to get the next meal on the table. So, unfortunately, it has become quite fractured, which I think is a shame, because, a lot of people, their first instance is to bash the strikers and attack the union bosses, which indeed they may have their own political motivations. But I think one thing you cannot ignore is that there is an issue in this country with how our public services are run and the funding model for our public services.
But the problem is, Nigel, they have been so unreasonable, 35% pay demands that actually...
Well, that was the junior doctors, yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. But they've been off this week, and actually I think we have realised that the striking is selfish, and so we're not giving in to them, and that actually makes strikes futile.
Well, actually, no, but it's working. That's the whole point. That
I don't think it is.
Well, RMT, for instance, although they're striking tomorrow against the train operators, they do seem to have a deal with Network Rail. Looks like it's nearly 14.5%. It's being balloted on at the moment, and they've called off action against Network Rail. The government wouldn't come to the table to speak to the nurses and the ambulance workers. Now they are coming to the table, and as a result of that, Royal College of Nursing, Unison, the other health union Unite, they've suspended strike action. So it's actually working in the sense they're getting a negotiation going, which was the whole purpose of the exercise when they started.
Which I think works in their favour a bit, because now there isn't as much leverage in terms of public opinion, because we are just used to them now. Yeah. So the government is actually forced to negotiate and actually find a middle ground, which hopefully, happens.
No, it appears not even preschool children settling down for cartoons are safe from Hollywood's obsession with gender extremism. I couldn't believe this. The Netflix series Ridley Jones, which is targeted at kids as young as 3, has been slammed by parents for a new episode that features a non-binary bull who wants his grandma, voiced by Cyndi Lauper, to start using they, them pronouns.
Wait any longer. If I'm going to lead the herd, I want to do it as myself. After all, you always say to lead with your heart, right? Well, my heart says that the way I feel most myself is to go by the name Fred. That's because I'm non-binary, and Fred is the name that fits me best. And I also use they and them because calling me a she or a he doesn't feel right to me.
I'm sorry I used the wrong name and pronouns. Thank you for showing me your heart.
Oh, poor kids. I genuinely thought that was a spoof when I first saw it. The Ridley Jones creator, Chris Nee, has now moaned on Twitter that future series and Christmas specials have actually been cancelled by Netflix. She tweeted, "Doesn't surprise me that Netflix has quietly dumped the first preschool show that has a non-binary character coming out. Go watch it. Show your kids. It's important. It's a roadmap for coming out, but also for having someone else tell you they've changed their pronouns and or name." I mean, come on. Good on Netflix for getting rid of this. Go woke, go broke. But I don't know why they produced the thing in the first place. Nigel Nelson, Dominique Samuels, Dawn Neeson, do stand by, because coming up, Fiona Bruce's week may be about to get even worse as she faces off against J.K. Rowling in tonight's Greatest Britain and Union Jackass. But next, in Uncancelled, broadcaster Nana Akua is here to slam BBC bad boy Gary Lineker and ask if his latest public spats with MPs and sports promoters are damaging the BBC's already shaky reputation. That's right after this short break.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank. My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's time now for Uncancelled. And this is where Britain's top commentators speak out on controversial issues without the fear of the cancel culture sweeping the rest of the media. Gary Lineker waded into yet another highly politicised Twitter row today, proving he's just taunting his bosses at the British Passion Corporation now. This time it was after Tory MP Jonathan Gullis rightly slammed the Match of the Day presenter's Nazi jibe.
I say upset people, I'm talking about the Twitterati, wokerati of North Islington, those who are the champagne socialists who pontificate all day long, the lefty lawyers, Keir Starmer's best mates, Mr. Flip-Flop, because he can't take a position on anything in this day and age. Those are the people I don't care upsetting about, because those are the people who want to call people up here racists, bigots, Nazis, like Gary Lineker has done, because they want to take back control of their laws and their borders.
Gobby Gary took to Twitter to express his rage, calling Gullis's comments outrageous and provocative. Outrageous and provocative Twitter comments. Well, who writes them, Gary? Meanwhile, boxing promoter Frank Warren delivered this knockout blow. Watch.
I have never heard such a disgusting comparison as to the British government and his analogy that it's similar to Germany in the 1930s. How on earth can you compare us as a nation with them? It's just disgraceful, it's demeaning. And the BBC are just a bunch of pussies who just rolled over and allowed that to happen, and it's disgusting. He's entitled to his views, but they're ill-informed views. It's an ill-informed comparison. Get your facts right. We're not Nazi Germany, we're Britain. And in Britain, we are good people. And in Britain, whether you like it or not, the refugees, illegal refugees that are here, are being looked after. They're not being gassed. They're not being worked to death. Fuck him.
Yes, what an incredible intervention there from Frank Warren. Let me bring in Nana Akua now. Nana, look, Lineker's come for you before, but do you feel he's now threatening the very existence of the BBC with every day that he remains in post? Because he's making it clear he ain't following the rules.
No, he's not, is he? I mean, look, he went on his champagne soapbox in Qatar where he decided to preach to us about the terrible human rights abuse in Qatar, but he still went. And he used the BBC as his soapbox, which he shouldn't have done because he works for the BBC and it's political. He talks about language, but yet the language he is using, I mean, how dare he compare the 30s to what's happening here? He needs to go over to some of those places in Kent where the invasion is happening, because those people who live on those coastlines, every day, almost 1,000 people are coming onshore from the safety of France to this country, and the people there are suffering. And Gary Lineker has not got a clue. He seriously doesn't. And the fact that the BBC, that weak Tim Davie, I'm sorry, Tim, but it was absolutely embarrassing, the climb down that he did. It was just... It has made an embarrassment of the BBC globally, because now Tim Davies lost control. How dare he pay those people those ridiculous salaries, almost $500,000 to Alan Shearer, that Alex woman, almost 200 grand. Collectively, those presenters would probably be able to fund over 100 local radio BBC broadcasters who are currently fighting for their jobs now. And if I want a BBC, I want a BBC that actually does the things that are in the community. So BBC Local Radio, I'm happy for my licence fee to go to that, but I'm not happy for my licence fee to go to the likes of Gary Lineker whilst he pontificates on high, telling me what a terrible person I am because I want to have our borders protected and actually to stop an illegal trade which brings misery to those who are partaking in it.
Absolutely. And Lineker never talks about the criminal gangs, does he? Ever. He only talks about the Tories. Now, Nana, I mean, thank God we saved you from the BBC here at GB News, because believe it or not, people will be very surprised to know that you used to work for the British Bashing Corporation. And I wanted to talk to you about this because I have been absolutely outraged by the intellectual dishonesty of folk who have tried to turn this into an issue of freedom of speech. Surely, Nana, when you worked at the BBC, you must have accepted that you were being paid for by licence fee payers' money. You had signed up to the impartiality rules. And as a result, you made a choice to give up your freedom of speech in order to take the BBC coin.
Exactly. That is the deal. Whether you are news or other elements of the BBC, you know that the thing that you are dealing with here is a state broadcaster. You are not to have your opinions and you're not to try and sway the public to go along with your way of thinking. You are not to take sides with the government. And if you do present anything, it must be done in a balanced fashion. And that's something that I held very dearly when I worked there. I'm very thankful for all the training that I had at the BBC. But I left partly because some of the things I was saying they didn't like. I lost things because of things I was saying. They said, we don't like what you're saying. We're going to take that show away from you. We're going to do this because you've said that. I've seen other presenters who have dared to comment on one of Gary's tweets and been told to take down their tweet, not him. And it's just, I left so I could have my opinion, so I could be at a place where I could speak. So if he wants to do that, then he can do that, but he needs to leave. This is not about freedom of speech. He's free to speak, but he's the highest paid member of the BBC. He's clearly a member of the BBC. He represents them, and as such, she should toe the line.
And we now know that the vast majority of presenters agree with him and are actually prepared to go on strike because they so believe in what he has to say. It's interesting tonight, a BBC executive, Nana, has said that the difference with the Lord Alan Sugar situation is that Lord Sugar is only on the BBC for a certain number of weeks per year, presenting The Apprentice, and when he's not on air, he's not overtly political on Twitter. But again, whether that argument holds, I'm not so sure.
No, I don't think that holds. He's not synonymous with the BBC. Lord Sugar was selected for a specific role within the corporation for a set job, and that job was specifically to hire an apprentice. And that premise is totally different to the premise that Gary Lineker has signed up to. Because of the BBC guidelines, Gary Lineker is a prominent face of the BBC. He is their highest paid presenter. There is no way out of that. And even Tim Davie, the last time Gary came out with his comment about Russian oligarchs, Tim Davie said that he had crossed the line and breached BBC guidelines. If that is a breach, so is this, and he should be punished. In fact, I would like to see all of the match of the day, all those presenters, I'd like to see them removed. I think they're all pathetic in their behaviour.
Didn't turn up to work. Sack him. And you know what Lineker needs to do? He needs to do a Nana Akua, and he needs to leave the BBC so that he can claim his voice back. Then we're not paying him, and he can say what the heck he wants on his little Twitter echo chamber being retweeted by that loser Alistair Campbell. Nana Akua, thank you so much. We'll speak very soon. But it's time now to reveal tonight's Greatest Britain and Union Jackass. My superstar panel back with me. Dawn Neeson, your Greatest Britain nominee, please.
Slightly controversial. I'm going to nominate Fiona Bruce, who I feel has been hung out to dry for simply doing her job on Question Time and legally qualifying the situation around domestic violence accusations against our Stanley Johnson. She was just doing her job, but unlike Gary Lineker, who we've just been talking about, everyone supports him, goes on strike. Fiona has been hung out to dry and been forced, literally, to step down from a domestic violence charity that she has fronted for a long time.
Dominique Samuels, your nominee, please.
Mine is J.K. Rowling, who actually follows me on Twitter. I was very pleased.
Jealous.
But it's for her comments, where she said that she knew her comments on the trans issue would upset Harry Potter fans, but she did it anyway because...
Do we have a little listen?
For women's rights. Yeah.
I absolutely knew that if I spoke out, many people who had loved my books would be deeply unhappy with me. I was considerate enough to phone my management team and say, you cannot argue me out of this. And I read out what I was about to say because I felt they needed warning.
I agree. She is incredibly brave. Nigel Nelson, your nominee.
Yeah, well, Gary Lineker was my jackass last week.
What's he done to...
But now he's changed his
himself?
Twitter profile to include the George Orwell quote that's emblazoned on BBC HQ about freedom of speech. And for that, he becomes a Great Brit.
Oh, vomit.
It's all so selective.
Oh, please.
God.
But look, I'm going to go with Dominique Samuels and J.K. Rowling as tonight's Greatest Britain. Union Jackass time now. Dawn Neeson, your nominee, please.
Oh, it's got to be Keir Starmer, hasn't it? During PMQs today for attacking Tory MPs for waging war on free speech in the Gary Lineker row.
Let's have a look.
Mr. Speaker, the sight of them howling with rage over a tweet, signing greening letters in their dozens, desperately trying to cancel a football highlights show. That should have been laughable.
Dominique Samuels, your nominee for Union Jackass.
Mine is a mate of these two, Carol Vorderman, for being an absolute hypocrite regarding the Hancock affair and her schmoozing that was pictured.
And Nigel Nelson, your nominee, please.
Yeah, I'm at PMQs too, and it's Rishi Sunak for washing his hands of responsibility over the controversy that BBC chairman Richard Sharp has caused, an old pal of Rishi's.
Do you know what? I'm going to go with Dawn Neeson and Keir Starmer on the Gary Lineker debacle. Number one, it was Labour MPs who first attacked, senior Labour MPs who first attacked Lineker for his revolting comments, including the Shadow Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper. Number two, I've never heard Starmer speak out for freedom of speech when it comes to the trans debate, when it comes to the vaccine injured, when it comes to the lockdown opposers. So the bloke is a massive political opportunist. End of story. Dawn Neeson, Dominic Samuels, Nigel Nelson, my superstar panel, thank you so much. Thank you to your company for your company tonight. I'm back again tomorrow from 9 p.m. The brilliant Headliners is up next, though, so don't go anywhere. Good night.
First and foremost, I am a